want to open this video with a memory of Eddie Van Halen, who passed away today, one of my favorite musicians of all time. 5150, rest in power. It was great getting to see the genius that was Eddie Van Halen for as long as I got to. Anyway, moving on, football. All right, so it is the end of the week. We have our week 4 totals of 2 Monday night games. We'll go ahead and cover that real quick, and then we'll talk about the division standings that they sit at the quarter mark of the season. So, to start off, the first Monday night game, Patriots-Chiefs, got pushed back one day due to COVID tests, and the Patriots had to trot out Brian Hoyer because Cam Newton was on the COVID reserve list. He was not eligible for the participation this week, and that turned out to be their Achilles heel because Brian Hoyer stunk up the joint. There was a critical play where at the end of the first half where he took a sack with no timeouts left. The clock ended up running out, and they got no points out of the situation. So you absolutely cannot do that, and then you cannot open up the next half with almost the same situation and almost the same results. So he ends up getting benched. We get to see Jarrett Stidham, which was kind of funny because while Brian Hoyer was out there, I was actually like, man, Jarrett Stidham, man. We talked about him for a couple of good solid weeks about how he was going to be the guy that they were going to roll with, next man up mentality. And while Brian Hoyer was still playing in the first half, I was like, man, Stidham must be garbage if he's not out there. So Stidham comes in towards the end of the game, does a little bit better, looks a little bit more poised, a little bit more life on the ball. But he ends up making mistakes that you can't afford to make against the Kansas City Chiefs. And despite the Patriots defense sort of stifling this Chiefs offense for as long as they could, they eventually were able to break out of it. The Chiefs end up winning 26-10. I get the green check for the victory, or for picking this correctly. The Chiefs get the banner for the victory. They're the real winners here. And Chiefs move to 4-0, and the Patriots fall to 2-2. So, moving on to the second Monday night game, which was, kind of similar. Both games felt kind of similar. Like one team was outperforming the other, and the other one was just trying the best that they could to, keep it close, and then end up having to play catch up. But the Falcons lose 16-30. They lose in a normal fashion this week, which I guess that's an improvement because you're not losing in dramatic fashion. So I guess that takes a little bit of the edge off. But Packers win 30-16. I get the green check for picking this correctly. Packers get the banner for the win. And overall, disappointing day for Atlanta where you have Calvin Ridley who gets no receptions. You have Julio Jones who re-aggravates the hamstring, has to leave for the second half. Todd Gurley just running straight up the middle and getting stuffed is becoming a highlight that we're seeing all too often. So if Dan Quinn survives this week, given what happened to Bill O'Brien yesterday, I'd be kind of surprised. I think through no fault of the offense doing what they can, it just looks dead in the water right now. Something needs to happen. Now, does that mean Dirk Cotter comes in and takes over as interim coach for the rest of the year? I mean, maybe. I think that's better than the Romeo Crennel situation that's currently happening in Houston, but it remains to be seen what Arthur Blank wants to do. On the Packers side of things, no Adam Lazard, no Devontae Adams. Who cares? Because you have Tonyan out of nowhere, 3 touchdowns. Goes absolutely nuclear in this game. And Aaron Rodgers is just back to his old self. I was completely incorrect on my call at the beginning of the season that they caught lightning in a bottle last year. They're absolutely going to steamroll through this conference, and they're going back to the AFC Championship, or the NFC Championship game. Excuse me. So, I figured that this format's a little bit better than just me reading off stats. So I kind of hope that these are the sort of game reviews that we can do going forward, because just sitting here and rattling off numbers seems kind of pointless when that's something that you can look up. I'd rather just give my take on the situation. So that with the 2 wins, or with the 2 correct picks, that puts me at 11-4 for the week. I was worried about this week because there was a lot of chalk. Chalk usually scares me because you got to pick some upsets. So I moved to 11-4 for the week. Overall, 42-20 on the season picking games. Feel pretty comfortable with that. There was some big misses, but going forward, we're starting to figure out the landscape of this league. So the picks might come a little bit easier. This was my best week picking games thus far. Speaking of the landscape of the league, let's go ahead and take a look at the standings, beginning with the AFC. Out here in the East, we've got the Bills leading the division at 4-0. feels like everything's running on all cylinders. Josh Allen avoids the injury scare in the game the other day on Sunday against the Rams. Yeah, overall, this is good. This is absolutely what you wanted to see. I was a year early on picking them to win the division. It just took an extra year to get Tom Brady out of here. The Patriots fall to 2-2. Everything runs through Cam Newton. Without Cam Newton, stick a fork in this team. It's done. Bill Belichick is a mastermind, but I don't think there's much more that he can do. When you have piss poor quarterback play that we saw on Sunday or Monday night. Dolphins are 1-3. We're just waiting for Tua Tagovailoa. That'll probably happen around week 8. Jets are 0-4. They're god awful. They're garbage. See you next year. In the AFC North, this is going to turn into be one hell of a competitive division. Even the Browns missing Nick Chubb shouldn't slow them down too much. The Steelers had the off week because of the COVID. The Ravens bounced back at 3-1. The Browns survive a shootout with the Cowboys, and then the Bengals win a game. So everybody in the AFC North is feeling pretty good right now. The NFC South is a little bit different. The Titans missed this week because of COVID. They were the Steelers matchup. The Colts are 3-1, but they're a very uninspiring 3-1 right now. I mean, their defense is good. The offense is just kind of fiddle farting around. Maybe eventually that'll change. The Jaguars, they were a little overhyped, I think, heading into week 2. I think we found out who they really are. There's significant limitations when it comes to Gardner Minshew's athletic ability, and I think that's going to hamper them moving forward. Probably destined for a top 6, top 7 draft pick. And then the Texans, 0-4. They're destined for no draft picks because they don't have one in the first or second round next year. This job, in my opinion, without Deshaun Watson, it couldn't be more unappealing. And the fact that they have Deshaun Watson, that helps a little bit, but still, there's very little in the war chest in terms of trying to turn this team around when you talk about draft picks or cap room draft picks. They've got injury-prone wide receiver core, a running back who has played well, but it doesn't look like the resurrection that we were hoping from 2015. So the Texans are in a tough spot, and I think with Romeo Crennel at the helm, it'll get a little bit better. They might have a team meeting, like players only or something like that, to sort of try to right the ship, but I expect them to steal a few games here and there. They'll probably end up with like 4 wins. Moving on to the AFC West, the Chiefs are 4-0 as we all expected. Every other team is kind of surprising because I figured this division would be a little bit stronger, but the Raiders look like they've fallen back down to earth after that win over the Saints. The Chargers are still struggling to find an identity on defense after losing Derwin James and a couple of other players. I believe Chris Harris is on IR right now, but Justin Herbert looks like the real deal, and that is amazing. Also on the injury side of the offense is Austin Eckler is going to be out for a significant amount of time, just a weird hamstring injury that he's come down with. So we're going to see a lot of Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson, but I like the Chargers going forward. I think they could compete with the Raiders for second place in this division. As far as the Broncos go, you're trotting out Jeff Driscoll and Brett Rippon. Good luck. See you next year. As far as the NFC East goes, worst division in football. This team should be banned from the playoffs for putting out this, this putrid nonsense. And yet somehow with the Eagles, taking the tie last week and getting the win this week, they find themselves in first place. Uninspiring offense all around. The Giants at 0-4 are probably they're going to challenge for the worst team in this league this year. Just nothing about them looks any good. I think Joe Judge is in trouble early on in his career. He may not make it to his next draft in 2021. And the Cowboys are the best team. They just have had a tough go of things. So I expect them to right the ship anyway. At 1-3, they could easily climb back in, win this thing at 9-7, maybe even 8-8. Moving on to the NFC North, the Packers are going to run away with this, no questions asked. The Bears are fraudulent. The Vikings have dug themselves into too big of a hole, and Matt Patricia is a clown. Moving on to the NFC South, this should be way more competitive because the Panthers are surprising. It's just, we're top heavy in this division. The Falcons, hook 'em, book 'em, cook 'em, forget about them. The Saints are clawing their way back in. They just got to get healthy. Michael Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore, they were pretty injury bug bitten last week. The other thing is the Panthers. They're really surprising me with how aggressive they've been on offense. Robbie Anderson escapes the clutches of Adam Gase and is beginning to be a nice reclamation project here in Carolina. And despite losing Christian McCaffrey, Mike Davis has played pretty well in his absence. Running backs don't matter. So going forward, I think the Panthers could definitely challenge for second place in this division and maybe even surprise some people. But I think Tampa Bay is the best team in this division right now. Once Chris Godwin gets healthy, this offense will be running on all cylinders. Yes, they just did lose O.J. Howard for the year, but they still have Cameron Brate, Rob Gronkowski, Ronald Jones. I think we're going to start seeing more Keyshawn Vaughn now that he's gotten an opportunity to play with the injuries to Leonard Fournette and LaShawn McCoy. So yeah, the defense for the Bucs is also good. Very biased because Antoine Winfield is part of it. And then the last but not least division is the NFC West, right now being dominated by the favorite to win the MVP, Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know who that plays corner in this league can stop DK Metcalf. And then you have Tyler Lockett, who is also having a marvelous season. Chris Carson, despite the injury scare, is still healthy. The Seattle's defense is not good, but if you're going to try to challenge them to a shootout, I think Russell Wilson is going to beat you 9 times out of 10. As far as the rest of the division goes, the Cardinals are starting to scare me a little bit. You know, they were one of my favorite underdog teams to climb into the playoffs this year after going 5-10-1 last year. Starting to falter a little bit. I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to have to do another one of those mid-season changes where he, kind of rethinks how he's doing the offense. You know, Kenyon Drake is not being involved in the passing game very much, and that's alarming, but a lot of his targets are being sucked up by the presence of DeAndre Hopkins this year. As far as the Rams go, I think this is the same team that we saw in 2018, just a little bit more inconsistent, and they should absolutely be able to right the ship. I think they just had an off week against the Giants. They kind of played down to their competition, if you will. And then on the bottom of the division is the 49ers. Well, they're not. Well, they are on the bottom statistically, according to win percentage. The 49ers are just completely slaughtered by injuries, you know, losing Bosa, Solomon Thomas, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Hurd. They got Deebo Samuel back, which is a great sign. George Kittle, he came back and he absolutely dominated. Nick Mullins went down with an injury, so that sort of quashes any quarterback controversy. This job will belong to Jimmy Garoppolo when he comes back. And I think once they get fully healthy, they'll start rolling. So it's still going to be one of the more competitive divisions in football, this one and probably the AFC North this year. It just depends on who wants it more and how, and you know, who can stop Russell Wilson in that wide receiver group. So that is my take on the landscape of the division so far after the quarter mark. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.